My name is Gary. I want to welcome you to another episode of Mindset Growth Podcast. I have Heather, my co-host, here with me today.
Good morning.
And how are you doing today, Heather?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm wonderful. Sun shining, most beautiful Midwest weather we could want.
Bugs are biting.
Yes, everything's green. Weather's nice. Vacations are happening for a lot of people.
Baseball and softball mostly.
Yes, a lot of sports, high school sports. So it's been interesting to transition this year. I don't know why, if it's just been that I've been so busy, but it seems like this summer has just arrived really quickly.
Mm-hmm.
So with that, let's bring in our next guest, Dan. I am not going to say your last name. Maybe I'll let you introduce yourself and then tell us a little bit about yourself, where you grew up, and then we can take it from there.
Yeah, sure. I'm Dan Feliciano. I'm from New York. Feliciano is a Puerto Rican last name, but I'm a New York Rican, which means I was born and raised here in New York. The part of New York where I live, which is the suburbs of New York City, sounds a lot like what's going on with you guys. Softball and baseball on the weekends. High school sports are wrapping up here. One of the local high school teams is in the state championship game, I think today or tomorrow. So that's pretty exciting.
That's exciting.
But yeah, generally kind of the same thing going on over there. Things are getting green, pools are getting opened, and life is starting over here.
Yeah.
Excellent. You grew up there. You were born and raised in that part of the country, I guess. Is that you went to high school locally and you're back in your hometown? Is that right?
Yeah. So I was actually born down near the Bronx, which we were just talking about. And then my family moved upstate, when I was young. And so I grew up here in Orange County, which is what we call the Hudson Valley in New York. So if you go north of New York City and you get to the tree-lined Hudson River over by West Point, and you extend that kind of all the way up to Albany, that's the Hudson Valley. It's beautiful. It used to be farmlands, and now it's being gentrified, but
Right.
Beautiful country, lots of open space. And so we grew up there, and I grew up there until I went off to university and then off into the Marine Corps for 10 years of my life, and flew helicopters in the Marine Corps. That was a lot of fun. Most nights I go to bed thinking about those days.
Yeah.
Left the Marine Corps, started at Shell as an executive, traveled the world with Shell, which was really kind of a lot of fun. My children were born all over the world. So I have a daughter who was born in the Netherlands, and my son was born in Malaysia. And then after all that fun was had, we decided to move back here to New York, where, my family are getting older. And so we wanted to be around family as my kids, came into their formidable years.
Right. Orange County. Years ago, I watched a TV show out of there. I don't know if you knew any of those folks or not, but I'm sure it may or may not be what you want to be famous for.
Yeah, I'm familiar with the show. I'm thankfully not familiar with the people.
Right.
But yeah, I know for a long time that's what Orange County was famous for. In fact, it's crazy because I didn't know that show, and I had already left and was in the Marine Corps when that thing was famous. So I thought that those guys were in Orange County, California. I didn't realize they were in Orange County, New York, until I came back one year to visit family, and they were talking about it. And I was like, yeah, I don't know. I think those guys are in California. Like, no, they're down the street.
Yeah, they're just up the road from us. No, I think it's been a little over a year ago. I was up in the Finger Lakes area too, and New York's got some beautiful country up there around that area, and it's great vacation spots.
So I got a question for you. I've got a friend that married a guy in the Air Force, and they had, I believe, 3 out of 4 of their kids were born overseas. So each child that they had overseas, they named them something that was familiar to that area. With your kids being born in other countries, do they have kind of a culture that they grew up with that they kind of attached to?
My daughter has a unique name that's specific to being born in Europe. Her first name is Tosca, which is an
Wow.
Italian opera, and she's actually named after a friend of ours that we lived with, or we lived near in the Netherlands, whose name was Tosca. But my son is, typical Puerto Rican son. He's named after my grandfather. So, like,
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
he's got the standard Puerto Rican first name of Emmanuel, which, then is shortened to Manny. So,
Mhm.
if you
Awesome.
go down to the Bronx and you scream Manny, like 50 people are going to turn around.
So you mentioned you grew up there, went to college. When you went into the Marine Corps, what was your motivation for that?
Yeah, I mean it's like your typical American story, right? It's I was we were poor when I was growing up, and so I mean I started working when I was 12 years old, and not for giggles, but because we just needed money I needed money in order to do the things that I wanted to do, and my family didn't have that to provide it for us, but. They did have money to do what we needed to do, which was get education, go on to university, which we found a way to do. And so what ended up happening is you have this Puerto Rican family out of New York, and all three children go on to university. My sister has got a PhD. My brother is extremely successful in the finance world. And then I was able to go on and join the Marine Corps. And it's just one of those things where we were given so much and had such an opportunity to be successful that both my brother and I believed that there was like something that we needed to give back. There was a debt that we owed
Mm.
to the country, and there's a lot of different ways for people to pay that debt, but our way of doing it was by serving in the Marine Corps, and my brother and I both. My father was in the Navy. My grandfather was also in the Navy. So we're just like have a family of people who believe that it's important to kind of do that service and, give back to the nation that kind of gave us so much. So
That's awesome.
we both were going to join. I went to the recruiter, and the guy was like, "Hey, do you have 2020 vision?" And I was like, "Yeah." And of course, I grew up, I'm a Gen X guy, so I grew up watching Top Gun. And he's like, "Do you want to be a pilot?" And I was like, "Heck yeah, I want to be a pilot, of course." Um, so, so yeah, I ended up going through flight school and becoming a helicopter pilot, which means my time in the Marine Corps was longer than most people. 10 years. When I said I was going to pay back my country, I didn't realize it was going to be 10 years, and then the 10 years that were most fraught with wars since like Vietnam, right? So, I mean,
Right.
I
Wow.
was in every conflict. My
Wow.
brother was in for 4 years as an artillery guy, and he never went anywhere except for the Mediterranean. And I was in for 10 years, and I never got a chance to go to the Mediterranean and go hang out in Iraq and Afghanistan for 6 years.
Wow.
Right. Well, I've got a nephew that's in the Air Force, and he was a crew chief on the F-16s, I believe. And so he, of course, ended up in the Middle East as well. And both my daughters are in the Air Force, and my son did a stint in the Army. So we're very
Yeah,
familiar with that lifestyle. Youngest daughter's abroad currently. So it's,
yeah, it used to be, like the way that people did things. I mean, my friends and I always used to talk about, um, changing demographics and people who join the military and don't. We always, found it interesting. It used to be that you would have, people from all walks of life, even Ivy League students would graduate and then they'd go serve and be officers in the Marine Corps. And now, people just don't do it as much anymore, which is,
Hmm.
interesting.
right.
But
There is a
it's
shift. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's the best 10 years I had in my life. I mean, my time now that I have children and I'm married, like this will become the best time of my life. But up until that point, those 10 years they were the best 10 years of my life.
Well, they were, can you say, testosterone fueled and adrenaline, and
Yeah.
I'm sure everything was pretty much at the max.
Yeah. There's never a time when you're not pushing yourself to be better, to do more, and it's not just, in your work life, but you're surrounded by people who have a
Hmm.
similar like ethic. And so they're, even when you're out playing, you play the hardest and then you work the hardest, and then you have this balance between just doing everything that you can at like this maximum
Yeah.
capacity.
That's something that's unique, and I don't know. Maybe you don't even want to discuss it too much, but it's unique a shift I see culturally in our country. Of we don't have, and of course the conflict that we had over in the Middle East was certainly has driven a lot of this. But back to your testament that not as many people are doing it. I mean, there was a lot of pride in it. In serving your country at that point in time. I hope that doesn't get lost because it's such an honorable thing for folks to do. But I also think there's a lot that I see of people that you just mentioned, you didn't have a lot. So you worked really hard before you ever got there. And it was that work ethic. And we often hear the phrase thrown around, hard times, make hard men, good times make soft men.
Yeah.
Or people, however you want to phrase that. And, I guess that's something that I'm sure you consider yourself because you can provide a different lifestyle for your children.
Yeah.
Like you were afforded. I know that's certainly the case for myself. And
I think about that all the time, actually. I think about, the honor, it's like an honor or a badge of honor, if you will, for me and my brother and my sister and my mom, who put herself through college, like when she was in her 30s, she used to like night school. She would have to drive 50 minutes in a Ford Pinto. It had a hole in the floor that we had to just put a cutting board over so that like her foot literally didn't go through the bottom of the Pinto. And she would drive this thing 50 minutes, 5 days a week at night while young kids were at home, still going through school. And a lot of that is a badge of honor. Like I look back on that now with like a big smile on my face
right.
and happiness. But yeah, I definitely think about that for my children and how like I can't even get them to go, bring the garbage outside without it being like I've asked them to go, to start delivering newspapers at the age of 12. Right? Like my daughter's 10. And our school district doesn't let her get off the bus by herself. I was like, that's crazy. I had to walk to school at, elementary school.
Yep.
But so my hope is that doesn't translate, that I can hold on to and instill some of the hard work that, my family instilled in me. And then, you hope that you instill those same values and ethics into your children, and then they can instill it into their children. So we'll see.
Certainly. No, I think that's been the case. I've seen it in some of my kids. They've been able to be resilient and work hard. But I also probably made it more difficult for them at times than what their friends had it, which they did not appreciate. I think they've all come back and thanked me at this point.
Yeah, they will. They will at some point.
They're still in their low to, I guess, upper 20s, but it's interesting. How soon they learn to appreciate that, especially when they get it back into, like even the military culture, and they start seeing all these people and folks that don't have work ethics, things like that. We might come back to some of your career on that. We want to move through a couple other questions that we ask everyone, because what we find is that some similarities play out in people that are typically successful or have gone through difficult times. And that's something we want to relay to our audience. And the next question I have for you is, do you have a morning routine?
Yeah, of course I do. And it starts early. My wife, when my wife and I first started dating, she was a sleeper, and she can sleep like crazy. I don't know how she does it, but I'm always been a morning person. I mean, like I said, I started a paper route when I was 12. And so I've been getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning since I was young, and then starting my day. And so I still do that. I'm up at 5:30 in the morning. I mean, as a small business owner, a startup owner, the first thing I do is check my email, and that's like while I'm still pressing the snooze button, I'm reaching for my email, because our company operates across the United States. And so even though we're in New York, when I go to bed at night, the company's still operating in Nevada and in Alaska. And so when I wake up in the morning, I'm like, what happened, right? What happened in the business last night when I went to bed? So that's the first thing I do. Coffee and stretching are next. And then generally I go through the news of the day because I want to make sure that, once the day gets going and we get into business and stuff like that, then I need to be informed on what's going on because our company does kind of interact with the world at hand. And so what's going on with people in general is important to know.
You want to share with us a little bit what your company does?
Yeah, so Clotheslyne is a tech startup. We just finished Techstars New York in February. And so basically what we've done is we've created a marketplace where people can outsource their laundry to gig workers in their local community. So generally speaking, it's women who are responsible for laundry, and they're outsourcing that laundry demand that the family puts on them to gig workers in their local community. The gig workers pick up the laundry at the customer's house, bring it back to their own house, use their own washer and dryer, so like they monetize their own washer and dryer, and then they return the laundry back a day or two later, depending on the type of order. So we started 2 years ago in upstate New York where we live. And now, like I said, we're in, 8 states across the country, helping families kind of claw back the time that laundry takes, which, is omnipresent. And, my family, we used to do Saturdays and Sunday. All we did was talk about laundry. Like it was constantly a discussion point. When are we going to do it? When are we going to fold it? How are we going to put it away? Blah, blah, blah. And now we don't ever talk about laundry except when we're talking about my business.
I noticed that first of all, what a great idea. Maybe we'll get into later how that came about. But I noticed that you're really East Coast, and then you have those outliers, Alaska and Nevada.
Yeah.
How does that happen?
Yeah, so we went through a tech startup accelerator program in Nevada, and so we moved. Cam and I, my co-founder, moved to Reno, Nevada for 3 months. My wife stayed here in New York, and so while we were there, it was an opportunity for us to stress test the product. Right, it's an app-based product. It's all virtual. And so we were like, can we continue to operate in New York, where most of our markets are, while also operating three time zones away out of Nevada? And so if you're going to build a company that's going to expand nationally, you have to at some point test whether or not it can operate without you personally being in charge of it or being there on the ground. And so that gave us an opportunity to do that. Can we continue to grow and be successful in one area while we grow and be successful in another area that's very far away with a totally different type of person and mindset? And, Nevada, Reno is where we were, and it's very much kind of like a Midwest mindset. And so we're two guys from just outside New York City who have a very East Coast mindset. How do you communicate to those people? How do you get customers? How do you continue to meet the demands of the customers who have totally different mindsets than you have? And so we were able to test that concept.
And then Alaska just followed right in there with it?
Alaska was a business opportunity with a woman who was already operating in Alaska. She needed help with laundry demands. And so that was one of those opportunities where we were like, this is a business opportunity. It's another way for us to test the program. Does it work? Who are people in Alaska? How do they operate? And so every time that we move, when we were first starting out our first year, every time that we moved into a new market, it was all about how this particular opportunity test how we look at the world and how we will become successful at business. And so we never really just said, okay, we're going to just operate in our bubble, and then that bubble is just going to expand 5 miles at a time until, we're here. We're like, this is our bubble. We know our bubble, but this bubble over here is way different. Like the people in Nevada like in New York, you Google wash and fold, and that's what our marketing material is on. But people in Buffalo, they call it fluff and fold. And like, how are you ever going to know that it's called fluff and fold unless you go over there and you like are like, what's successful over here? And so you have to figure those things out. And if you do it at the very beginning, then when somebody comes along and they're like, oh, hey, we like your idea and we want to invest in you, but how are you going to become a bigger and bigger company if you get my money? I'm like, well, I can do that because I know exactly how to communicate with people all over the country. I know how they think, and really all I need is money to go into these different markets. I've already got the playbook. So everything we did that first year was really to build a playbook that could be successful across the entire United States.
And this is less than a 3-year-old company, right?
Yeah, no, we're 2 years old. So
2 years old. And then one thing that we're seeing in our part of the country is that dry cleaners are becoming very scarce, especially through the whole COVID deal. Yeah. I think a couple of them closed in that process in local to us, and it's very difficult. So I don't know if that's something you guys get into as well.
Yeah, no, we don't do that. I mean, the clothing has changed, right? I mean, ready-wear clothing is what people are preferring, and clothes that can be washed are really what manufacturers are building nowadays. And so we only do wash and fold, and that services 90% of what our customers are looking for. And then that really allows us to stay in the gig economy, which means that we can continue to provide employment opportunities for people who, have these assets in their houses that are really just sitting around 80% of the time, right?
Right.
And in particular, most of our service providers are women who up until now really didn't have an opportunity to join the gig economy, right? They're not going to be Uber drivers. There's a perception of safety there. They're not going to, what's the point of them going out and picking up Burger King from somebody? They have to leave their family or what they're doing to go pick up Burger King. And so this is an opportunity for them to be in the gig economy and work from home, right? So they still get to be, with their families or with whoever that they live with, make a little bit of extra money while they're at home using assets that they already have.
No, that's excellent. I was wondering about that side of it because there's really 2 points to that business where you're providing a service for families, but you're also providing revenue and income for another person that otherwise maybe not have that opportunity. So yeah, that is awesome. Before we go much further, we're getting way off track here. We've kind
of jumped around. It's all right, though.
We've got a couple of things. We like to call them rapid fire questions. We don't ask.
Let's do it.
But we're just going to dive into those. So Heather, I'll let you take that one away.
So we know that you have traveled quite a bit over those 10 years. But if there's one place that you could go to for a full year, where would it be?
I get to live there, and is it a place that I've been already, or is it a place that I want to go?
Doesn't matter.
Yeah, so if I could live there for a year, I would probably go back to Istanbul in Turkey. If you've never been there, it is spectacular. It's like this melding of all these different people, right? So you have Christians and Catholics and like Orthodox Catholics, but then you also have like Muslims, and so, but they all live, really well together, and you're right on the, like almost the center of the world, right? So like from there, you can go east, you can go west, you can go south, and you can see all these different people come together and share ideas, and it's really spectacular place. The food is great, and the weather is beautiful all year round. So it's a pretty amazing place.
Wow. Okay. I've never been there.
Yeah, well, I highly, highly recommend it. It's one of the only places in the world, well, probably the only place in the world where you can have breakfast in Asia and lunch in Europe.
Wow.
Maybe, I need to go visit my daughter then.
That's where his daughter is stationed now.
Well, not in that town, but in Turkey.
Yeah, Turkey.
So, another one. What is the most useless talent you have?
The most useless talent that I have. I play golf, and I think that's a pretty useless thing to know how to do. I mean, it's one of those things that absorbs your mind and your time all the time. All you do is think about it, and then you have to tell your wife about your golf game, and she does not want to hear it at all. And so for her, I'm sure she thinks it's useless. I keep trying to convince her that we do business on the golf course, but I know it's not. I know it's just like this obsessive compulsive thing that I do. But I wish it was. Yeah, it is. That's what you say. That's the marketing for it. But really, it's just a giant 5-hour waste of time.
I think that's golf. Their marketing plan in general is that everybody needs to use it for business. And I'm not saying at times it doesn't happen, but rarely.
Yeah, most of the time it's just frustration and thought provoking.
That's one of those things that you can take with you through life, though, as you get older. Like pickleball is so huge right now, but I've tried it. I'm terrible at it. I don't feel like it's conducive to my knees personally. I feel like golf is a lot easier on the body.
Yeah, and it is a great sport in that sense because my father, who is 78 years old, he and I still play every Wednesday evening in like a men's league. And that's really special time that I get to still share with my dad. And even though he's much older, you know, we still get to spend that time together. So
right.
That's great.
It's awesome.
Do you have a favorite quote?
Do I have a favorite? Yeah, I mean, I think my favorite quote is illegitimata non carborundum, which is Latin for never let the bastards weigh you down.
Okay.
I like it.
Yeah.
It
keeps you in a good frame of mind, right? Because, you know, you can't control what other people are going to do or say or try to do. You know, and if you allow their behavior or their thoughts and actions to dictate how you behave and accomplish things, then, you know, it's a hard life. But if you don't, you know, things are a lot easier.
Right. I think that's something that I know most people have to work through. And I know, Heather, you and I have experienced it working with people. So many decisions are emotional and that people make, and they're emotional because it's of how other people are going to view those decisions. And yet ultimately we live our own life. We've got one shot at it, and it's so controlling and consuming on what other folks think. So
for sure. You beat yourself up over your own decisions all day long. Why are we beating ourselves over somebody else's decision?
Right. They have a completely different upbringing, mindset, point of view. Yeah.
So let's go back a little bit to your military career. You felt a duty to serve your country. I sometimes think that it ought to be a requirement that every person needs to do for at least 12 months, and it could be in various capacities. I know my parents even went back to, and it was back in the days when it started, I think, when there was a draft during the World Wars, and they just, you know, served in hospitals and other capacities like that. I know those experiences shaped their lives and built friendships with people across the country that were valuable to our family forever. And so that's one thing that I think was a really good process for everybody to go through. But with you going into the Marine Corps, and you had already mentioned you're a pilot, having gone to school, did you go in as an officer?
Yeah, so I went through officer candidate school in Quantico, Virginia. I chose the worst way to do it. So there's two ways to do it. One is like a 10-week program where you just do it and you're done. I chose the 2 6-week programs, which are like 2 summers. So I went between my sophomore and junior year, and then between my junior and senior year. And so then, like, I ruined my entire junior year of college because I was only thinking about the fact that I had to go back to boot camp for another 6 weeks.
Separately, I'm Gage.
And I'm Bontrager.
Together, we are Gage Bontrager Consulting.
We work on changing your mindset,
developing leaders,
building systems and processes,
helping you grow personally and professionally
to achieve the success that you want personally and professionally.
However you choose to define success for you.
Reach out to us and follow us on social media or look us up on the website, and that will put you on a path to achieve what is missing in your life.
Thanks for watching this episode of Mindset Growth Podcast.
And, and everything that you already know. I mean, it's good when you go into officer candidate or boot camp for one time and you're there and then you just get it over with, right? But to do it and then have to do it a second time, that was pretty brutal. But yeah, no. So I went through officer candidate school down in Quantico. It was spectacular, though. I mean, going through it twice is not what I recommend, but going through it once. There's an old saying. I think it was MacArthur. I can't remember which general he said, but he was talking about the military academy, about West Point. And he said, you couldn't pay him $1 million to do it again, but you couldn't pay him $1 million to have never done it. And that's the way I feel about, officer candidate school, or generally about that training program, which is really difficult. It shapes you and it makes you a stronger person, and you really get sharp at what you're doing and how you're going to do it. So it was great.
So there's a lot of pride that's carried in the Marine Corps, and rightfully so. And of course, I've mentioned my kids took other branches. The Marine recruiter actually scared my son, I think, out of being there. But just where he was at in life, he wasn't prepared, I think, for that interaction. What was your reason for choosing the Marine Corps?
Yeah, I mean, that's the mentality that I have, right? I mean, I played sports in college. I was, my family is just that kind of family. It's the same reason why I started a startup. My mentality is that I'm going to do something and I'm going to win at it every single time. And that's the Marine Corps mentality, is that we're going to give you, it takes you $1 to go from here to there. We're only going to give you 7 cents of that dollar, and you still need to get there. And when you tell me that, I'm like, yeah, let's freaking do it.
Right.
But you tell that to other people and they're like, that doesn't make any sense. You already know you need 97 more cents,
Right.
And so for some people that's how they think. But for Marines, we're like, yeah, no, I'm just going to run straight into this wall and knock it down, even though you told me it's impossible. And that was attractive to me. I enjoyed that. And, so yeah, that was the biggest reason, was, the idea that there was not many of us. There are only a very few of us, and we all have that same kind of let's go knock that wall down mentality.
And I know the Marine doesn't have as large of a flight program as what a lot of the branches do. How did you work with other branches, and where'd you end up for training?
Yeah, so I mean, the Marine Corps does all its training through the Navy. So I was down in Pensacola and Corpus Christi. I ended up being a flight school instructor at the end of my time in the Marine Corps. So you go through the Naval Aviation Training Program, which is where the Coast Guard goes, the Marine Corps goes, the Navy goes, and then also the Navy has kind of a system that works with the Air Force. So some Air Force kids go through Navy training and some Navy kids go through the Air Force training. But generally you go through Pensacola. That is, I will say this, and I will defend it until the day that I die. That is the hardest training anybody does. I don't care about SEALs or Army Special Forces or any of that stuff. Navy flight school is the hardest thing anybody will ever do in their life. It is 2 years of final exams every single day, both a practical and a written final exam every day for 2 years. And when I got my wings in 1999, there were only 25,000 other people who had ever gotten their wings in the history of the United States. So it's a very, very small group of people.
So you probably built a lot of community and knew a lot of the people in that program then.
Yeah, everybody in the Marine Corps knows all the other pilots that are in the Marine Corps, at least on the helicopter side. There's a jet side to the Marine Corps, and I wasn't as familiar with the jet guys because once they finish um, primary flight school, they go off to jet training, and then they're kind of like separated forever, and
Right.
you almost never see them again. But all the helicopter guys stay together. We all through training together, and then we're all on the same part of the airport. When
Okay.
we go and we actually fly our airplanes, and so generally most people know each other because there's just not a lot of us.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going through playing a lot of sports, and I've seen two things happen with kids that play sports, and I'm leading up to my question here. But when I see kids play sports in high school and then even in college, Heather has seen me go through this process of often try to look for athletes for certain positions because I felt they understood the aggression and how to fight for it. But what I have learned is a lot of those athletes are not that successful always in business life because they have played up to through high school and maybe didn't want to put the work in that it took to go to college, or at college they were good, but they didn't want to put the work in to go professional. And what I'm seeing is they were just naturally talented. When you get to the business world, my mentality, is like yours. You've got to fight for it.
Yeah,
And if they start telling you no, now you know it's getting good. Now
yeah,
you know you have something you really can fight for because other people are saying it won't work. And I see a lot of those athletes I don't see all that translate. And then the other thing that I've looked at was a lot of times I would look for people that served in the military. And I've learned you even have to break that down a lot because I can sit here and have a conversation with you and understand really quickly your mentality is very different than, let's say, the Marine that came in was infantry, couldn't tie his shoes without an order. And then I'm thinking he's a Marine, but he can't even show up at work unless I'm screaming at him. I'm not
yeah,
going to do business that way. I'm not going to
yeah,
scream
yeah.
at you every day to make you perform. And so there's a big, vast difference. And I'm sure you've seen this across your service in the military, but now you're in business. I bring this point up because I want the audience to understand we work with a lot of companies and they're looking for talented people. And as you look for that talent out in the workforce, it takes special people with different mentalities to be very successful in business.
Yeah, I think it has to do with like whether or not you've had a leadership role, whether it's in sports or it's in the military, right? And so, I mean, one of the things that's great about the military is that not everybody gets to be a leader. Like if you don't earn it, you're not going to be a leader. And so, you talk about a corporal or a sergeant in the Marine Corps. Um, you could stick around for 5 years, 6 years in the Marine Corps and still be a lance corporal. Like if you're not good enough to lead other Marines, then the Marine Corps is not going to make you a corporal. They're not going to make you a sergeant if you're not good enough to lead other leaders, right? So like a corporal is going to lead other Marines. A sergeant's going to lead corporals and other sergeants. And so now you have to not only be good enough to lead other people, but you have to be able to lead other leaders.
Mm-hmm.
And the same thing applies for officers, right? So I got out of the Marine Corps as a major. Not everybody makes it to major, right? You have to be able to prove that you can lead other leaders in order to be able to get promoted through the ranks in the Marine Corps. And the Marine Corps is unique like that. There are, not to put down the other services, but a lot of them are just time based in the way that they promote people throughout their services because they're so big, right? And so they
Right.
have to have certain roles be filled by a corporal. That corporal may never lead another human being. It's just that role, that technical role requires a certain rank, right? But in the
Right.
Marine Corps, it's so small and all it's about is leading other people all the time. And so you don't get to be in a point of leadership unless you've earned it. And the same thing applies, right, to sports, right? If you have like some kid, he's just a defender. I played soccer. He's like a defensive guy. He wasn't like a captain of the soccer team or anything like that. And he just played through high school. Yeah, I mean, that's not but if he was the captain of the team and the rest of the team recognized him and that's how he became the captain of the team, then, that's how okay, he's not only an athlete, but he can lead other people in a situation that's very high pressure. And that's where you kind of can differentiate athletes and military people.
And, I think in business, oftentimes we see the same thing happen with companies. They try to promote based off of time or just position, and we like them and personality. And I'm sure they can do it. And it fails many times, and it's not based on merit of what they've done and what they've worked to earn. And so I just wanted that's anytime I talk to somebody that's been through the military or an athlete and coaches, I love to talk about this because I want people listening to this to understand it still takes special people to do special things. And just because they've went through certain experiences does not qualify them to have what you may think they need in order to take, your company, your sales team to another level, or that location that's struggling to revitalize it. Because if it comes back to leadership, and this is a little bit off base, but I know I just read this again, and I know this is true, but it was a friend of mine and just commenting about her relationship with her husband and how she understands now that she loves him so much because she loves herself that much. And so it's just kind of a thing in life. A lot of times if we don't have the confidence in ourselves, if we don't believe in ourselves, if we don't love ourselves, it affects all those other relationships. And that's, I think, one thing that I can tell the Marine Corps has taught you is to have that confidence and to, believe in yourself. And so thank you anyway for that. I'm kind of going off on a rabbit trail there. You can bring me back on track.
So, all right. Why don't you bring us back to how you go from, I know you, after working in the Marine Corps, you worked for Shell. You did a lot of stuff still around aviation, but now you are helping people with their laundry. How does that happen?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a different industry, but it's still kind of the same. It really is just about like helping and leading people is what we're doing. I mean, I'm in an ultimate people moving industry now. So I used to move people and materials in my helicopter. And then when I worked at Shell, I moved people and materials through Shell's logistics program. And I went up to the ranks and became a regional manager at doing that. And so now really what we're doing is the same. We're moving people and laundry through people, right? And that's about motivating them, making sure that they have the right equipment to be successful, making sure that we have the right systems in place that will allow them to be successful, for our customers to be serviced properly. So yeah, I mean, it's not flying anymore, and believe me, I wish it was, but it is really just about moving people and moving things, and then making sure that everybody has what they need in order to be successful. And I think that, real business always comes down to that. Real business success always comes down to moving people and whatever it is your product is in one direction, and making sure that everybody has the same marching orders and that they're comfortable and supported throughout their journey. So as long as you can do that, you can really do anything. I could sell hot dogs on the side of the street, and then I would have 50 people selling hot dogs on the side of the street within a year, because it's just people and hot dogs at that point.
So you're also a CEO of another company, is that correct?
I have a couple other companies that, I mess around with. Yeah.
So how do you stay focused and how do you manage your time? I feel like there's a lot of work-life balance that people talk about these days. And, it's about structure and support.
Yeah.
What are some of the biggest motivators or things that you do to keep those checks and balances?
I think the big thing is that I look at everything through process Like, so that's how we did things in the Marine Corps. It was like there was a process, there was a way to be successful, and you learn the formula and then you repeat it over and over again. And that's what we did at Shell. And I built a lot of processes at Shell that people emulated and used in other business units across. And really, so that's what it's all about, right? Like I told you at the beginning, like we spent 1 year just testing Clotheslyne in multiple areas so that we could be successful all the time. So when we do those tests, we then capture like how did we do it, what were we successful, and how do we replicate that in someplace else. And so as long as you are just constantly creating processes, successful processes, it's really just about implementing those. And then you like allow people to be successful, right? Like my co-founder, this is your job in the company. Go and do that. And we'll talk about what you're doing once a day or once every other day, but I'm not going to do your job. You need to go out and do your job. And here's the tools that you need in order to be successful. The same thing with the people in my other companies, right? You guys are good at what you do. Go do it. If you need something, tell me what you need and I'll provide it for you if we can. And if I can't, then you're going to have to figure it out on your own. But the key to all of it is like you can't be doing everybody else's job. You have to like hire people that are going to do their job, train them properly, give them the support that they need and be successful, and then trust that they're going to go out and be successful.
So a lot of small business owners, I believe their biggest hindrance that we cross paths with is the fact of they lack the trust in other people taking over a portion of their job because they've started and created this thing and they think that only they can serve a client. There's a couple of things that probably come into, you talk a lot about some systems and procedures, but you also talked a lot about leadership. And Heather and I in our company, we do business coaching and we really focus only about 20% of the time on actual systems and processes. They need to be there. They need to happen. But if you don't develop the leadership side of things and develop the people and get the right pieces in place, that's kind of been our model that we help companies with. There's others out there that are just systems-based driven on everything. I'm hearing you talk more in terms like how we visualize it. What are some of your thoughts on that? And what would you recommend to a small business owner that's stuck, that really needs to grow to be successful? What are some advice you'd give him?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing that most people struggle with is the thing that you talked about earlier, which is like they think they're the first person that ever did what they're doing, and so therefore all the information and knowledge resides in how they do it or how they solve the problem, and that's a really hard thing to convince people of releasing, because if they're successful, then every time they're successful, it reinforces the thought that what they're doing is the only way to do it and it's the best way to do it. And I can prove that because I'm successful, right? And so the first thing that when I'm talking with small business people, or a lot of my friends come to me and ask me, how do I start a business or whatever? My first thing to them is like, you have to be super open to listening to other people's suggestions about your business and how it runs. And then you have to bring on a couple people right at the very beginning that will help you understand that it's a team effort. And so I usually start people off with like a bookkeeper, right? Because one, bookkeepers are going to know more than you do anyways. And so as a small business owner, it's like you can give that up a little bit and be like, okay, I feel comfortable. I'm giving this up and I'm letting this person do this other job and they're helping me. And now you're like, okay, like the freedom that you feel from like passing one part of your world off to another person to do, then that can translate to other things later on down the line, that you can feel more comfortable passing little parts of the business that you built off to other things. And then, it's not as scary when you have to bring on, employees or a manager or something, and they want to offer you advice on how to get something done. So a lot of this is really just about helping them become comfortable sharing the responsibility, and that there are other people out there who can help you, bookkeepers, your accountant, your attorney, whoever it is, right? Like they can help you.
So you're leaning on other people a lot to give input, and you're hearing it out and utilizing it. And I think that's even, because we work with people that they won't even, well, can I trust somebody to do my books? It's that type of thing. And I'm like, well, if you don't trust people, they're probably not going to trust you. This is a two-way street on all of this. And clients will even feel that if there's that lack of trust sometimes on the inside of the company. So
we also see the other side of that sometimes too. Once a client has figured out how to let go of some of their responsibilities, they're like, this is pretty cool. Yes. I do have time back to myself. What else can I have this person do?
Right.
And that's pretty fun to see. It's like, it's good to let things go, and you don't have to worry about working yourself out of a job. It's your business.
Right.
Yeah. It's an epiphany. Sure. It's an epiphany for a lot of people. And you can almost feel like, or see them like release a little bit of pressure in the way that they behave. And then, and then really the sky's the limit at that point. Then people can really become successful.
Yeah.
So this is a question I want to throw past you, because I know you have multiple businesses. Our country's experiencing a little bit different economic situation than what it probably has in a number of years. You're Gen X, so you've clearly seen some of the, financial ups and downs over the years. And the thing that I find interesting oftentimes is that people talk about recessions. And, I'm old enough to remember back in the Carter era when it was large inflation at that time. And so now we're back in another era of time where there's inflation. And I think what I often see happen is I currently see that we're in a time of inflation, and I think there's tremendous opportunity if we're smart and wise and calculated going through this. I also see people who view this as a recession, and they're going into the mode of trying to lock down and control and contract, and it's killing their business.
Yeah.
And you're seeing a lot of small businesses struggle right now, and it's more the mentality of their leadership. Inflation is what it is.
Yeah.
They say, they make comments like, well, I'm going to wait until prices come down. They're not coming down.
Yeah.
You're going to, whoever adapts first wins.
Yeah, I mean, I think from a business perspective, the issue with inflation and the economy right now just means that like access to money is a little more difficult than it was probably 3-4 years ago when, interest rates were low and you had a little bit more freedom to get money from the bank, but also there were investors that were investing a little bit more freely. That's just not the case now, and so you do have to make sure that every dollar that you spend is properly and effectively spent. But you need to be, if you're a small business owner, you need to be investing in your company, whether it's now or 10 years from now or 5 years ago. If you're not investing in your company because you're afraid of some outside impact on the economy, like then it goes back to the comment that I talked about earlier about never let the bastards weigh you down. Like you cannot be concerned about that. If you have a strong business, if you have a good business that's doing good business, and you have in place the things that you need to have in place in order to be successful, it's going to be successful now. It's going to be successful 5 years from now. The only thing that's going to make it not successful is if you mess it up. And worrying about the economy is what's going to make it mess up. I mean, you need to make sure you adapt, but you need to do what you're doing in your business and just keep doing it, and everything else kind of will work on its own, unless you're, somebody who lends money, and then you need to worry about that. Bro. I imagine most of your clients are not money lenders.
Right, and that can be an adjustment. I understand that. If you were going to give a young business owner that's maybe a startup or just, he's doing it a few years, if you're going to give them like 2-3 things of advice that are most important, what would those 3 things be?
I mean, the biggest thing that I have to say I say it to my co-founder all the time. He's only 24. I say you have to be fearless, right? If you have an idea and you think that it's going to work, then you have to be fearless in how you how you attack it, how you go after it. And, you just have to make sure that when you're doing it, you're thinking through like the next step, and then like 5-6 steps down the road. Like the next step is not the obstacle. It's what's going to happen 5-6 down the road from that step that you just made. And then the second thing is like every single thing that's ever been done can be done better, right? So if I go on, I went on a podcast last month and they asked me, what's my favorite business book, and I always tell everybody my favorite business book is Moneyball, which is about how the guys in Oakland transformed baseball. I mean, baseball
Right.
had been around 120 years doing things exactly the same way. It was $1 billion business, and then you have these two guys come along and they're like, no, we're not going to do baseball like that. We're going to do baseball like this. And they revolutionized the way that people look at and analyze baseball. And if everybody just sat around and said, oh, well, we've just been doing things like that for 120 years and we're not going to do it like, we're just going to keep doing it like that, then nothing would ever happen. It takes guys who are willing to be like, no, I don't care how long we've been doing this. I'm in the laundry industry, right? Like people have been washing other people's clothes since the Romans. But in my opinion, they're not doing it right. Like the only way to do it is the way that I'm doing it. And I'm going to revolutionize the way laundry is done in this country and probably in the world. And so you have to just say like that, right? If baseball can be changed, then whatever you're working on, it could be better than what the way they were doing it before.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. That's a great movie. I guess I didn't even realize there was a book. I've watched that movie so many times.
Yeah, read the book. I have like 6 versions of it. All of them have notes in the sides. When you read the book, they really get into like the data and the
Formulas.
analytics and
Right.
stuff. And so it's pretty interesting.
Well, Daniel, I want to thank you for joining us on Mindset Growth Podcast. This seems like it's been a really quick hour. I wish you nothing but success in the laundry business. I think it's a fantastic idea, but even more fantastic is the idea that you took and decided to create something new and different. And you're providing services to one group of people while providing yet another service to another. And connecting those, that's what has made this country great. And you're definitely one of the citizens that are improving it with the efforts you have. And I think, too, the world will probably hear from you before you're finished with your career. I think want to thank you for your service to our armed forces. It's very honorable that you took that time from your life. I know they gave you a great foundation. You learned many lessons, but I want that to be noted as well. We thank you for your time on Mindset Growth Podcast and wish you nothing but the best.
Thanks a lot, guys. I appreciate it.